Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Audra bids Nate farewell after his devastating setback. Discloses that Kane Ashby will have a devastating setback, and Audra Charles will bid farewell to Nate Hastings. Kane will be irritated by Phyllis Summer's repeated visit on the train. She will accuse him of procrastinating and question whether he will ruin her hopes. Phyllis won't wait for Kane to finish explaining things to the twins, but he will feel compelled to do so. Kane will inquire about her knowledge of artificial intelligence since Phyllis would be pressing for a project to support their objectives in the interim. Kane will urge her to become an expert in AI, even if Phyllis will acknowledge that she has dabbled with it. Kane intends to explain to Phyllis how artificial intelligence fits into his business goals in Genoa City when she completes that task. Devon Winters will tell Lily Winters on Nate's Audra problems at society during Friday's Y&R episode. Devon will also learn from Lily how she attempted to control Kane and possibly made matters worse. Lily is worried that Kane would just have revenge now that she has rejected him once more and the twins are also pushing him away. Nate will threaten to leave Audra at Crimson Lights if she continues to tell him falsehoods. Audra will imply that Nate appears to have already made up his decision, so she won't believe her words will change anything. If Audra just tells the truth, Nate will argue and pretend that they still have a chance. Audra will continue to place the blame on Kyle Abbott and intensify her deceit. But Nate will continue to pursue Audra outside on the terrace. Nate will keep pointing out flaws in Audra's story and attempting to get her to tell the truth. When Audra brings up the idea of Victor Newman hiring her to destroy Kyle's relationship with Claire Newman, she will question what Nate wants her to say. Nate will inquire as to whether that is the case and pressure Audra to acknowledge that Victor made that offer in return for funds for Vibrante. Audra will pretend to be upset that Nate thinks poorly of her rather than telling him the truth. Audra will not stay and be labeled a liar, despite Nate's best efforts to keep her from going. Rather, before she goes out the door, Audra will say farewell to Nate and emphasize that this is his loss. Kane will then enter and express his sorrow to Nate at the passing of Damien Kane. In the end, Nate will snap and make it plain that Kane should be held accountable for all that transpired in Nice. Before receiving a text from Charlie Ashby, Kane will also have a clumsy catch-up with Esther Valentine. Since they no longer know who their father is, Charlie will pressure Kane to stop calling and simply leave him and Matty Ashby alone. Lily will notice that Kane appears distressed when she gets there. In the hopes that he can resolve this, Kane will show Lily the text. When Lily asks why Kane lied about his other life, Kane confesses that he didn't want Lily or the twins to see him fail. When Nate returns, he will see Devon and tell him what transpired with Audra. Nate will be concerned that perhaps Audra was telling the truth and he ruined a fine relationship for nothing, while Devon will pretend it's for the best. Nate will also emphasize that Audra ended it, and he may have permanently pushed her away. Phyllis will take her tablet to the park and begin reading news articles about artificial intelligence. Phyllis will make fun of Audra for crashing and burning when she appears. Before the conversation shifts to Kane and his activities, Audra will question why Phyllis is concerned. Phyllis will maintain that Audra's intellect cannot handle the scope of Kane's work. Audra Charles' farewell to Nate Hastings was never going to be simple, and when the devastating setbacks around Kane Ashby's spiral became entangled with her own strained romance, the drama in Genoa City reached a fever pitch that even seasoned players like Phyllis Summers could barely manage to keep track of. And while Audra stood at the edge of Crimson Lights with Nate pressing her for the truth about her double-dealing, her connection to Kyle Abbott, and whether Victor Newman had indeed pulled her into a conspiracy designed to fracture Kyle's budding relationship with Claire Newman, she realized that every lie she had spun had come back to choke her, because Nate, battered by disappointment after disappointment, had no patience left for her evasions, and though he insisted they might salvage what little remained if she simply told him the truth, she only leaned further into blame-shifting, pointing toward Kyle as the architect of her ruin, arguing that Victor's name should not be dragged into the mud. And when Nate kept cornering her on the terrace, his voice firm but aching with betrayal, she knew he was prepared to walk away forever. So she did what she had always done when faced with losing control. She hardened her expression, dismissed his persistence, and ultimately offered a cold farewell, telling him it was his loss, that he would regret doubting her, and she stormed out, leaving Nate to sit alone with the wreckage of yet another relationship tainted by deception. And though Audra's words rang with finality, her exit did not silence the storm still brewing in Genoa City, because across town Kane Ashby was enduring a devastating setback of his own, one tied not only to Damien Kane's passing, which reopened painful wounds in his fractured family history, but also to the hostility of his twins, Charlie and Matty, who no longer wished to speak to him, no longer wished to carry the burden of a father whose past mistakes seemed unending, and this rejection carved into Kane's heart even more deeply than Lily Winter's repeated refusals to reconcile, because he had long believed that perhaps, if nothing else, he could repair the bond with his children, but now even that seemed like sand slipping through his fingers, and Phyllis Summers, ever relentless and eager to prove her value, chose this moment to ambush him on the train with yet another lecture about procrastination, accusing him of dragging his feet on their plans, pressing him about whether he would ruin her hopes and sabotage her chance to demonstrate that she could still be a formidable force in the world of business. And Kane, already emotionally frayed, wanted nothing more than to explain himself, to tell the twins his side of the story before more judgment fell upon him. But Phyllis refused to wait, dismissing his need to mend family ties, instead pushing for answers about projects, strategies, and deadlines, until Kane, weary but pragmatic, decided to redirect her energy by asking what she knew about artificial intelligence, hinting that the future of their entire operation hinged on her capacity to master this new frontier. And though Phyllis admitted she had dabbled, her confidence faltered in the face of his urging that she become an expert, that she dig into AI not as a passing trend but as the cornerstone of his business ambitions in Genoa City. And while Kane promised to explain how the technology would integrate with his goals once she had done her research, Phyllis was left simultaneously excited and unnerved, wondering whether this path was a genuine strategy or just another one of Kane's desperate ploys to prove he was still relevant. And as this professional tension simmered, Devon Winters met with Lily at society, revealing what he had overheard about Nate and Audra's implosion, trying to lighten the load of his cousin's heartbreak by putting it into perspective, though Lily herself carried the guilt of knowing she had perhaps worsened Kane's decline by attempting to control his life, her choices pushing him further into isolation. And she admitted as much to Devon, worried now that Kane's rejection by her and the twins would harden him, that instead of seeking redemption he might only seek revenge, his old self-destructive instincts clawing back into dominance. And while Lily voiced these fears, Nate continued to spiral after Audra's exit, confronting Devon at yet another juncture and wondering aloud whether he had been too harsh, whether Audra had been telling the truth after all, and if in his stubborn demand for honesty he had destroyed a good relationship for nothing. But Devon, steady and pragmatic, assured him it was better this way, that lies corrode everything in time, though Nate could not shake the ache that Audra's final farewell had imprinted on him, because even as he said she ended it, he knew his relentless interrogation might have driven her permanently away, leaving him not only devastated but also uncertain of his own judgment. And while this romantic wreckage unfolded, Kane stumbled into Esther Valentine for a brief, clumsy catch-up that provided him no comfort, especially when a new text from Charlie arrived, blunt and heartbreaking, demanding that Kane stop calling, stop intruding, and simply leave the twins alone, since they no longer knew who their father was. And this message, more than any scheme or professional setback, broke Kane in ways he struggled to conceal. So when Lily later arrived and caught the expression of anguish on his face, he showed her the text, hoping she might at least understand his pain. But instead she pressed him on why he had lied about his other life, why he had tried to mask his failures, and Kane confessed that he simply did not want Lily or the twins to see him collapse, to witness his defeat firsthand, that his entire pattern of deception was rooted in shame rather than malice. Yet this explanation did little to repair what had already been shattered, and when Kane crossed paths with Nate, who was still raw from Audra's abandonment, the encounter turned volatile. Because while Kane tried to express sorrow over Damien Kane's death and the weight it brought, Nate snapped, declaring that Kane should be held responsible for all that had transpired in Nice, placing blame squarely on him and refusing to temper his anger. And as the night wore on, Phyllis, in her restless determination, retreated to the park with her tablet, immersing herself in articles about artificial intelligence, taking notes, mocking the hype, but also recognizing the immense possibilities. And it was there that she encountered Audra once more, the woman newly cast adrift after severing ties with Nate, and their conversation quickly turned sharp, with Phyllis mocking Audra for crashing and burning in her relationship, sneering at her inability to manage either men or power, while Audra, defensive, snapped back that Phyllis had no reason to care, demanding to know why she was even invested. But Phyllis, never one to waste an opportunity to assert dominance, coolly maintained that Audra simply lacked the intellectual range to comprehend the scale of Kane's work, that she would never be able to grasp the integration of artificial intelligence into the future of business in Genoa City. And this final jab not only set the stage for further rivalry between the two women but also underscored the chaos rippling outward from Audra's farewell to Nate, Kane's alienation from his family, and Phyllis' relentless ambition, with every character positioned precariously on the edge of betrayal, redemption, or collapse. And as the week's storyline closed, it was clear that no one in Genoa City would escape the consequences of these devastating setbacks, least of all those who thought they were strong enough to weather them without breaking. The fallout from Audra's farewell to Nate reverberated far beyond the terrace of Crimson Lights, because when she walked away with those sharp final words about it being his loss, she did not merely sever a romance, she detonated a bomb that sent shockwaves through Nate's sense of trust, Devon's cautious optimism, and Kane's fragile hold on both family and business. And while Nate wrestled with whether he had made a mistake by pressing too hard, Audra's own resolve hardened as she drifted into the night, her mind flickering between anger at Nate's lack of faith and determination to reassert herself in Genoa City's power games, though her usual weapons of seduction and persuasion had lost some of their edge after being exposed in so many half-truths. And meanwhile Kane, torn between grief over Damien Kane's death and rage at the continued estrangement from Charlie and Matty, sought solace in work but found none, because Phyllis Summers was relentless in reminding him of his obligations, demanding to know if he intended to actually deliver results on the projects he dangled before her, or if he was content to waste her time with vague promises about artificial intelligence and future plans that never seemed to materialize. And though Kane snapped back that she had no idea the kind of pressure he was under, Phyllis coolly parried that excuses were the only thing she had consistently received from him since their partnership began. So unless he wanted her to walk away, he had better get serious about the AI initiative, because she was already immersing herself in research, already piecing together how algorithms and automation might reshape media and influence, and she wasn't about to let Kane's procrastination sink her chance to prove herself again. And while this power struggle continued, Lily confided to Devon at Society that she could see Kane's desperation bleeding through every interaction, and though she pitied him, she was terrified of enabling him, because every time she softened, he clung harder, and she feared that this time his revenge might not come in the form of reckless affairs or financial blunders but something darker, something destructive, especially now that the twins had made it abundantly clear that they wanted nothing to do with him, a rejection that could ignite his worst impulses. And Devon, pragmatic as always, urged her to stay firm, arguing that Kane's collapse was of his own making, but Lily could not shake the sense that he was unraveling too fast, that the man she once loved might cross lines even she could not anticipate. And sure enough, Kane's night only grew darker when he returned home to find a second text from Charlie, even harsher than the first, warning him never to show up at their campus again and threatening to block his number permanently. And though Kane tried to tell himself it was just anger, just youthful rebellion, the words hit him like knives, leaving him doubled over on the couch, staring at Damien's obituary and wondering if perhaps fate was punishing him for every lie, every betrayal, every moment of weakness he had tried to bury. And when Esther Valentine stopped by with a gentle offer to listen, Kane could barely respond, brushing her off with the excuse that he was busy, but his eyes betrayed the truth, red and wet from tears he refused to admit. And elsewhere, Nate attempted to regain his composure by confiding in Devon about the blowout with Audra, replaying every word in agonizing detail, especially the part where she implied Victor Newman had indeed orchestrated a scheme to destabilize Kyle's relationship with Claire Newman. And though Devon dismissed it as more of Audra's manipulations, Nate couldn't help but wonder if she had slipped up and told him the truth, if perhaps his fury had blinded him to the possibility that she was actually a pawn rather than the instigator. And this doubt gnawed at him, threatening to turn his heartbreak into a cycle of self-recrimination, and Devon, though supportive, inwardly feared that Nate's inability to let go would drag him into another spiral just as Kane's unraveling threatened to destabilize the family yet again. And meanwhile Phyllis, after her late-night research session in the park, found herself face-to-face with Audra once more, and their tense exchange only fueled her ego, because mocking Audra for losing Nate was just the beginning. And when she leaned in and told her point blank that she lacked the capacity to grasp Kane's vision, She wasn't simply bragging. She was staking her claim as Kane's indispensable partner, a declaration that left Audra rattled but also. Disasters had a way of defining a person just as much as triumphs did. And the stakes were personal as well as professional. Since Billy Abbott's faith in her leadership had been shaken, subtle cracks forming in the trust they had painstakingly built over months, while at the same time, Phyllis Summers was sitting across from Kane Ashby in a private corner of his sleek office, ready to present the results of her first assignment. And though she carried herself with the calm, measured confidence that Kane expected, internally, she felt a rush of adrenaline, knowing that this was the moment to prove her worth, to show that she was not only capable of following directions but could anticipate moves, manipulate outcomes, and execute under pressure. And when she laid out the details, how she had gained access to Abbott Communications' internal files, identified weaknesses, and even discreetly triggered subtle miscommunications during Sally's event, Kane's expression remained unreadable. The calm mask hiding the thrill of knowing that Phyllis had delivered exactly what he wanted without tipping anyone off. And yet, there was an implicit expectation that this was only the beginning. Kane made it clear that while he appreciated her resourcefulness, he expected her to take it further, not merely gather intelligence, but leverage it strategically, and Phyllis, always attuned to the balance between risk and reward, nodded carefully, already plotting her next moves, aware that the difference between being indispensable to Kane and being expendable could be a single misstep. Meanwhile, Sally was already mobilizing, refusing to let the launch party disaster define her, because to accept defeat was to give Genoa City the satisfaction of seeing her fall, and Sally was not a woman who surrendered easily. She began contacting key figures in the media, smoothing over misunderstandings, and scrambling to present Abbott Communications in a more favorable light, even as Audra Charles' shadow loomed over the evening's events, a quiet menace that suggested the disaster might not have been accidental, and the thought alone sent chills down Sally's spine. She knew she had to act quickly, to repair relationships and credibility, but the harder she tried, the more she realized that every move was being watched, not just by Billy but by rivals, by the Newmans, and possibly by Kane himself, because in Genoa City, no one ever moved in isolation, and every victory or setback was immediately exploited for advantage. Phyllis, on the other hand, was already working behind the scenes, taking Kane's subtle hints and translating them into a plan of action. She recognized that her success with this assignment wasn't just about hacking files or gathering information. It was about creating leverage, ensuring that Kane had the upper hand in any future dealings with Abbott Communications or anyone connected to Sally, Billy, or the Abbott Empire. The thrill of operating in the gray areas of morality, of manipulating outcomes without overtly stepping into the spotlight, reminded Phyllis why she thrived in these high-stakes games. She began drafting a series of contingencies, ways to nudge Sally further off balance while maintaining plausible deniability, ensuring that Kane could exploit the situation without appearing to be directly involved, a delicate balance that required every ounce of Phyllis' cunning and foresight. Sally, meanwhile, was dealing with the immediate emotional fallout. Her colleagues were nervous, her investors were asking questions, and even Billy, though supportive, could not hide the worry in his eyes, and Sally knew that if she didn't act decisively, Abbott Communications' credibility could erode further, and any future ventures might be met with skepticism or outright dismissal. She began drafting emails, arranging meetings, and even personally visiting key clients, using her charm, determination, and sheer force of will to convince everyone that the launch party was a minor hiccup, not a signal of incompetence, but every step forward felt precarious, because the shadow of sabotage hung over the company, suggesting that this disaster was only the first strike in a longer, more insidious campaign against her leadership. Back in Kane's office, Phyllis was strategizing not just for Kane but for herself, recognizing that her future depended on executing the assignment flawlessly, but also on ensuring that she retained enough autonomy to maneuver, because while Kane was powerful, unpredictable, and rewarding, he was also exacting and could turn on anyone who showed weakness, and Phyllis was acutely aware that a single misstep could cost her everything she had worked for. She mapped out potential outcomes, anticipating Sally's responses, and even predicting how Billy might react under pressure, understanding that every emotional and professional reaction could be leveraged in Kane's broader plans, and perhaps even in her own ambitions if she played her cards right.